Lisa, welcome to our meeting.
Thank you, Warren. I appreciate that.
So need to take a attendance, Eric.
I see Giebert, Potter, Bachhuber, Hanairo, right?
Very good.
Julie Urban,
Yes.
and we're missing Sue Pellman so far.
Okay, first item of business then is approval of the minutes from April 20th.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye. Minutes are approved. So the next item, Eric, is the fees in lieu for Pinehurst.
That's correct. And we'll switch over to a map. I can find a good one. This is kind of the corner of the industrial park on the west edge of town. And Sarah Church with Veerbecker is here. So this site right here, the county's big wetland is off to the west. Hidden Oaks is up over on this side. Sarah, if you want to give a brief explanation and tell me, if you want me to show a particular map, I think take it away.
Yeah, if you want to scroll, I think towards the end, you could probably scroll all the way to the end. There's the construction plans. Those might be the best for you. Or at least the most representative. This works too, Eric. This one. This is the drainage map. So currently the site has an industrial building that's a commercial space, and they're looking to add 2 additional buildings that would have commercial office spaces. I think they're going to be some sort of, for lack of a better word, like workshop areas, and then additional parking as well for those buildings. We're planning a dry detention basin there on the north side of the existing, thank you, of the building, and then a bioretention basin in the northwest corner. Due to high groundwater in that area, that bioretention basin is going to have a clay liner to protect the groundwater in the area. And that is what is prohibiting us from meeting the groundwater recharge and infiltration requirements on the site. So this is a mix of new development and redevelopment, but it's pretty heavy on the new development side. They're going to be bringing in utilities, water, sanitary as well back through the site. Did I miss anything? Do you need?
I agree with Sarah. It's poor soils and there's not really an option here.
So the infiltration and groundwater recharge would just go into the wetland area anyway, so we're really not losing very much.
Correct.
Yeah, seems okay.
I'll move approval of the recommendation from the staff to grant the fee in lieu of.
I'll second that.
The only discussion I have on, Eric, you and I have talked before about the fees in lieu of, and probably wouldn't apply to this site, but it seems like the developers get off light by having fees in lieu of versus building an infiltration basin and have to maintain it forever. And I don't know if we should go back and revisit our fees in lieu of calculations.
Well, you guys did do that about 2 years ago with Gary, and Eric Thompson had done a pretty complicated analysis. And you're right, I think you raised the fees, I think they were 18 cents and now they're 20 cents. But I'm not entirely sure of all of the discussion and logic of how that decision was made.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure after hearing Greg Freeze talk about how Madison does it. It's more of a negotiated, each one individually.
He did make it sound a little bit like that, but I don't know if that'd be the best policy for us.
No, I'm not sure. I'd rather have a more of a standard, but do you know how we compare to other, of course, do any other cities or have a fees in lieu, or are we unique? I think we're probably unique.
I think you're correct. You know, this is over and above what anybody else is doing that I have seen.
Yeah. It does seem getting off without long-term maintenance is a real advantage for the developer, but I guess we don't have to approve it if we don't want to.
Well, they do have a biofilter,
Yeah,
you know, which
Yeah.
is still going to have to be maintained, and the same problems that a bio infiltrator would have.
And we're only considering this fee in lieu of because of the soil condition and groundwater condition. We wouldn't be having this discussion if there was good separation and soils that were conducive to infiltration, right? They would have to meet the requirements.
Well, that's correct. In any other community, they would just get their exemption and would not pay any fee at all. Warren, Lisa has her hand up. Lisa, we're pretty informal, kind of just
Okay.
talk over each other.
All right, I'll jump in next time. I just had a question. This may be for Sarah. It's kind of similar. I agree with Warren, by the way, that, you know, it does seem like there might be a different way to approach this, but the question for Sarah would be, I'm looking at page 43 of the packet, the agenda packet. I'm sorry, I don't know what page that is of your plan, but it's got a text box starting with seeding rate. Yes, that's it. And I'm just wondering, you know, again, thinking about ways to increase sustainability in Middleton, instead of using the DOT highway seed mix, is there any chance of using more like a native seed mixture instead? Would that be too difficult to maintain, or is this an option?
I can't speak for the developer, but in the bioretention basin will be required to have native plantings. But for the rest of their, what would normally be like a manicured lawn, I wouldn't speak for them. I can pass on the request, but I wouldn't commit for them.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Well,
there's no further discussion.
Actually,
We have a motion, a second.
No, I think Lisa brought up a good point, and I guess I'll ask the question on the dry basins, Sarah. And I didn't read it. Sorry, that is the seed mix in the dry basin going to just be a mowable Kentucky blue or fescue or something like that, or is there going to be anything?
Yeah, it'll definitely be something mowable that they can be able to, you know, keep it maintained and the capacity of that basin.
Makes me wonder about the emphasis on evapotranspiration. And again, I don't know the numbers. Ken, maybe you do, between a wet prairie mix versus Kentucky bluegrass or fescue. If there's, you know, more evapotranspiration occurring, that's kind of one of our current priorities.
Yeah, I think we've got to rethink the infiltration requirement, because we put that in years ago, long before we had the issues of we thought about the issues of climate change, and now one of the big threats is rising groundwater. So I really think we have to go back and rethink the whole issue of a separate requirement that's just the main purpose of was to sustain groundwater. And I think we got to think about the whole issue now of groundwater flooding as a potential problem. So I just put that on the agenda for future discussion.
Sarah, remind me, are these dry basins going to be lined with a clay liner?
The dry basin that's north of the existing building unless they encounter groundwater during construction of that one will not need a liner. The bow retention basin in the northwest corner will require a plate liner, just because where the groundwater is, and then also because that's where all the sediment is going to. The dry detention, sorry, I should have clarified that too. The dry detention basin is routed to that bow retention basin.
Okay.
So this is Julie. So the only option you said is fees in lieu of or nothing. So, but you mentioned briefly Madison's option. So could you explain a little bit about what Madison does?
Is that for me, Julie?
I
Probably
guess.
better for you,
Someone who
Eric.
can
than me.
address it.
Well, one of the meetings you missed, Greg Freeze from Madison was here, and we were talking about the recent ordinance revisions that they had made. And they have increased requirements for redevelopment a lot, and they're relying on primarily on green roof systems, or that was their intent. You know, and the green roofs are trying to solve the urban heat island effect, and they are increasing evapotranspiration, but not necessarily providing infiltration. When you look at any municipal ordinance that I've ever seen in Wisconsin, and when you look at the state regulations, if you have poor soil conditions with high groundwater, you are, not only are you exempted from meeting the infiltration requirement, but oftentimes you're prohibited from infiltrating depending on the land use or the source areas. If it's an industrial source area, they don't want you to infiltrate. So usually a development that runs into that situation doesn't have to infiltrate. And that makes sense for kind of the same reasons that Ken is talking about, that you don't want to just mound the groundwater or, you know, pile more groundwater on top of what's already there. It's the same thing that a developer is forced to do if he wants to put in like a septic field. I guess the only difference would be is they can create a mound septic field where they're kind of pumping the wastewater, you know, into an elevated situation and then letting it percolate down. So Middleton is very unique in that we have this fees in lieu program, and it really only applies to infiltration and recharge because the county will not allow fees in lieu for water quality or rate control. And even though it's not written that way in our ordinance, we're bound to meet the county's requirements also.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
I think Greg indicated though that they did some horse trading with developers, not just exempted all of them. Isn't that correct?
I think that's what he said, yes, but I can't describe that really in any detail.
I don't know what that really means.
Only Greg knows what that really means.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah. Maybe we got.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, the motion's carried.
To clarify, the motion is to accept this as presented.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
All right. Warren, the next item on the agenda was your water quality summary presentation. And Warren provided me with a updated PowerPoint from the one that was included in the packet agenda.
So like I do every year, we have 3 gauging stations. I'll go to the next map, next slide. And we have 3 gauging stations that we operate with USGS, and every year I do a summary of the data that was collected at those sites. And as indicated by the red diamonds, that's the location of the gauging stations. That's the North Fork gauging stations, Airport Road. That's the South Fork at Deming Way. And then the other one is the main stem at Parliamentary Street, which is below the confluence pond. Next slide, please. And this is the precipitation for the year, for the water year, October 1, 2020 through September 30th, 2021. And it shows the precipitation that occurred at the gauge. And so 21, we had a very dry year, which is unusual. There have been 35 to 40 or better inches per year. In this case, it's like about 23 inches.
Wow.
Gauge does not record snowfall. And so last year we had about, not this year, but 21, we had about 50 inches of snow, which is about 5 inches of water probably on a ratio of 10 to 1. So we probably had close to 28 or 29 inches of precip for the year, which is one of the first dry years we've had in a long time. Next slide. And this is a slide showing the recorded discharge at the station at Parliamentary Street. And you can see we didn't have we had a lot of small peaks, but only one in October that was probably close to the 2-year flood, about 280 CFS. Next slide. And this is the slide showing the North Fork and the South Fork. And the one on the left is the North Fork, the Airport Road. And you could see a lot more small peaks than you can see at the South Fork. South Fork has a confluence pond, which does dampen all these small flood peaks. So you could see the benefit of the South Pond, at least for small floods, it's effective in lowering the flood peaks. Next
Warren,
slide.
Warren, I'm sorry, for the South Fork, you said you mean the confluence pond or the South Pond?
Oh, I'm sorry, the South Pond, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and anybody want to have any questions, please just ask me as I go through. I tend to go kind of fast and there's a lot of data to look at. This is the annual sediment load that's recorded at the Pheasant Branch at Parliamentary Street gauge. And it shows the trend line, which has a decreasing trend. And I didn't mark this one, but in 2002, that's when we built the confluence pond. So you could see after 2002 that there is a substantial decrease in the amount of sediments, except for 2018 when we had that large flood and we had over 12,000 tons at the gauge. And a lot of that was a bank failure just upstream from the gauge. Next slide. This one shows a combination of the stream flow, which is increasing over time, and the sediment, which is decreasing. So generally speaking, without any controls, as the stream flow increases, the sediment load also increases. In this case, you can see our sediment load is decreasing in spite of increasing flow volume. Looks like I forgot to add that flow volume, didn't I? Oh no, that's fine. Yeah, I did. Okay, next slide.
Same axis.
This is the phosphorus load for that Pheasant Branch, and the data only goes back to 1993. So the trend line is not as steep as the other ones. But you could see in 2021, we had a very small phosphorus load, one of the lower ones we've had in recent years. Next slide. This one shows a combination of concentrations of phosphorus in the orange squares. And you can see the concentrations are decreasing, and the blue diamonds are the flow volume at the Parliamentary gauge, which are increasing. There's a little bit of dilution that takes place as you get more flows, and the same phosphorus load, you will probably get a lower concentration. But if you look at 2021, where that blue diamond is around 2,800 CFS, we have a concentration probably in the range of 100 to 200. But if you go back to 2005 or 2003, you could see about the same type of flow and much higher concentration. So it does appear like we're doing a good job in reducing the phosphorus loads in spite of increasing discharge.
Warren,
Yeah,
the phosphorus concentrations there are just simply the average annual concentration, right? The whole volume divided by the load to get the average concentration.
right. I just take the load for the year and divide it by the flow volume to get the
Yeah.
concentration.
All right, thank you.
You could look at individual storms and get concentrations. And when Kim Meyer was on, I think they were talking about looking at Yahara winds program by looking at that, and you might get a different value if you look at, like I say, a breakdown of a storm event, because we have a number of samples during the course of the storm. Usually, if there's any kind of a large storm, they take 12 or 15 discrete samples or during the storm event, and along with discharge, and you could get concentrations for each one of those samples.
They aren't doing composite sampling with these stations?
After that, then they composite it for do the analysis. The sampling is discrete, I believe, but the lab analysis is a composite to save money.
Yeah.
Next slide. We haven't done this before, but we got enough data now on Deming Way to South Fork and the North Fork to look at annual stream flow volume again. So as you could see, the stream flow volume on the South Fork increasing trend, and a much steeper increasing trend on the North Fork. Next slide. And this is the sediment loads, and you saw a decreasing trend at Pheasant Branch at Parliamentary because we had a longer record. But if you go back to 2012 and look at both of these, that actually the sediment load is increasing, and the load is increasing faster on the North Fork, as you would expect. There's more sediment from the rural area than there is an urbanized area. But 2021, you can see a very small load from the South Fork and a little bit larger on the North Fork. Next slide. And this looks at phosphorus and kind of the same trend. In this case, looks almost the same, but you have to look at the scale. On the South or on the North Fork, the scale goes from 0 to 25,000 pounds, where on the North Fork, it goes from 0 to 8,000. So it looks like the same, in this graph, like the same kind of load, but actually the North Fork is much larger, is what you would expect because of the large sediment load and the ag load from manure spreading probably. And the next slide is a little more, I made a comparison side by side, looking at them and with the same scale. And then you could see the gray is the South Fork and the orange is the North Fork. A much larger load coming from the North Fork. Next slide. And this pie chart just shows that the North Fork in 2021 had a combination of 95,000 tons and then the intermittent area of 38,000 tons. So we probably had like that 65% of the 67% of the load came from the sediment load came from the North Fork, and 33% from the South Fork. Next one looks at phosphorus the same way, and much larger load of phosphorus. So we have almost close to 80%, 70, 60, 72% of the load of phosphorus coming from the North Fork versus 18%, 28% from the South Fork. Next slide. And this is the confluence pond that shows the sediment and phosphorus that has been trapped from 2012 through 2021. So in 2021 on the inflow for sediment, we had 198 tons. And the outflow of 88 tons. And so we trapped 110 or 56%. For phosphorus, we had 3,420 pounds going into the confluence pond and 2,169 going out, or trapping 1,251 pounds for a trapping efficiency of 34%. And the average trapping of sediment is 62.7% and phosphorus 25.7. And I mentioned again in the bottom, it does not include that sediment phosphorus load from the, whoops, I misspelled August. 18 to 21 flood, because of our gauge on the South Fork got inundated, and the load at the Parliamentary site was really just because of that big bank failure right upstream. So it really is not good data to include in the trapping efficiency of the pond.
Warren, just
Yes.
to clarify, the year is a calendar year, right? A complete calendar year?
Those are complete water years, like USGS uses from October 1 through
Okay.
September 30th.
Okay.
But they are a full year.
A full year. Okay. Yeah. Because I noticed, 2021, you explained earlier what a dry year that was. And
Yeah.
when I first saw these data, I thought, is that not a full year? Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, I didn't know what to expect when we saw a really dry year, whether our trapping efficiency would change that much. So I kind of thought we would trap more sediment because it's drier, but I think timing and when it occurs, and there's a fair amount of not air, but it's not an exact science calculating the trapping efficiency. So I think it's probably in the ballpark. And I don't know why some of the years, like in 2016, we had a 89% trapped. Maybe more detailed analysis would might show that. Next slide, which I just added this one because the confluence pond didn't show very much as way of flood peaks, and not the confluence, South Pond, how it was knocking down the flood plates or reduce them. So I decided to look at Spring Harbor and see what was happening there, because the headwaters are kind of adjacent, and Spring Harbor is all urbanized, like mostly the South Fork. And you can see on Spring Harbor, they have a lot higher flood peaks and more of them than we have on the confluence pond. So even though on the South Pond, even though we don't think we're doing very much because of our ordinance came into effect after a lot of the watershed developed on the South Fork, it looks like we are making some progress on reducing flood peaks on the South Fork. Then the Spring Harbor drainage area is probably half the size of the South Fork, so I was surprised at what the difference was. And I think that's the end of it. Yep. Any questions? If not, that concludes items on the agenda for the meeting.
Thank you, Warren.
Yep. The only other thing is items for possible discussion in our June meeting. Do you have a list of things that we're going to talk about, Eric, possibly in June?
Well, we'll have appointments and new officers. I'm not optimistic I can get to a full zoning ordinance, or stormwater ordinance. We might have a draft of the zoning ordinance that we can review. I should have a proposal from EOR to look at additional flood reduction scenarios. And Bach, Hubert, Potter, and Giebert, we're having a meeting next week with DNR to talk about flood mapping. I expect that might generate another proposal from EOR to talk about, you know, how to advance with revising the flood maps.
Okay,
Won't really know that until
And-
next week.
And I can tell you that the Sustainability Committee is going to, the month of June will be our time to get comments from committees and from the public on the updated draft of the Sustainable City Plan. So this is one of the, this commission is one of the bodies that we really do want some feedback from. I can tell you right now, the plan is all focused on energy, even though sustainability does include water, of course. But you'll see why we're focusing on energy. But I would request that we have a, 5 to 10 minutes on the agenda to get any feedback from members on that draft document. It's short. We're going with, a very, it's not like, the kind of sustainable city plan you would get from a consultant. We're trying to make it accessible to any member of the public.
that sounds good.
Lisa, that's an update from the plan that was adopted, what, 2 years ago maybe, or?
No, this is the first sustainable city plan was adopted in 2000 and I can't remember if it's 9 or 10. It might be 2010. And it was the intention back then was to update it every year. And the first actual update started in 2017 and because of turnover on staff, it was postponed, started up again just as the pandemic hit. So, so it has taken a while. But yes, the plan is now to, it's a very action-oriented plan. And the goal is to update it every 3 years and to have the Sustainability Committee create its own one-year work plan every year based on what's in the Sustainable City Plan. You'll see it, Kelly Hilliard plans to get it out sometime next week.
Okay, sounds good. Eric, you and I have talked a little bit about the increased, or my concern about the increase of volume of flow in the Graber Pond because of evapotranspiration that's going to be lost in the watershed, and the potential for a possibility of having a consultant or someone do a more detailed model like the premise model that includes evapotranspiration. And I don't know if that would be an agenda item for us to talk about, or.
Well, do you want me to seek a proposal from EOR to amend that earlier report? EOR will be on that meeting next week with DNR if you want to pick their brain about it.
Okay, I'd like to do that. Yes, good idea. Okay, if not,
And go ahead, Jim.
Okay, one thing on my notes here is that, Eric, I don't know where we are with, is MSA still in the process of remodeling or doing additional modeling for Graber Pond and the outlet elevations, that whole issue?
They're still on the hook for it, and I think they've done or almost completed an assessment that DNR wanted done, but they're really waiting on kind of final information from Bell Farm. And then also from our own Parliamentary Street project, which I think is experiencing a minor delay itself.
When you say Parliamentary Street project, you mean the Tribeca Pond or something different, something else?
No, I mean, they can, the road reconstruct.
Okay, so that's, there are several things that have to fall into place before we get any update on that analysis. Okay.
And
Okay,
I have
before
one
we-
other thought, maybe not for next time, but for some point. I don't know, maybe it's not within the scope of this commission, but I know the Renew the Blue launch was today, and I just thought that might be a useful thing to spend a little time discussing what what is Middleton's involvement and what can we do through the city to promote this and follow through. Just a thought.
Were you down there, Lisa, this morning?
No, my husband was, he works at the Wisconsin Memorial Union, and he texted me and said, you should be here for the breakfast. He said it was a great event.
I was supposed to be there, but I woke up sick this morning. I feel better now, but I wasn't,
Oh,
I couldn't make it down there. I was planning to be down there for that, but anyway,
That was Clean Lakes Alliance breakfast
Yes.
you're talking about?
yes, the breakfast. That was at the Edgewater, I believe, but yeah.
yes.
Okay, it sounds like a good idea. Before we leave the meeting, I'd like to thank Sue for being on the Water Resource Commission for all these years, and thanks for your contribution, Sue.
Welcome. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be with your committee for several years. I enjoyed working with you.
Good.
Thank you, Sue.
Mhm.
That concludes our meeting then.
Vote to adjourn.
Now, the meeting's adjourned.
It's adjourned.
Thank
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Bye-bye.